Okay, let's face it, everyone hates their job. You hate your job. You and I both hate your job. And who could blame us? Your job blows. Slaving away for money at some life-sucking, dead-end gig, sometimes up to 8 hours a day? Why do you live like this? Not gonna lie, some of that blame goes to a mob of workers who gathered almost 140 years ago in Chicago's Haymarket Square, where what began as a mostly peaceful labor rally would end in a violent confrontation between police and protesters. A bomb is thrown, guns are fired, cops and civilians alike find death. Later would come trials, hangings, and of course, parades. And we know it today as the Haymarket Massacre. In Haymarket Square, in Chicago, Illinois, it was May 4th, 1886, and you had to be there. In the 19th century, life is still nasty, brutish, and short, and so are most people. The American working class is rife with unrest in this era known to history as the Great Upheaval. As with most upheavals, there is much for labor to be sick about. As a typical workman, you're pulling a 10 or 12-hour shift, 6 days a week, all for an honest $1.50 a day. Backbreaking, dangerous work up to 70 hours a week for the princely sum of $9 or $10. And you got 5 kids. Make that 6. Which explains your growing interest in organized labor's fight for the 8-hour day. The 8-hour workday promised you 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. Well, the math certainly works out, seems reasonable, but at the time, this is a revolutionary and to some dangerous idea. That in exchange for your labor, you, working man, are entitled to a full 8 hours of self-determination. To spend at your leisure, be it worshiping your God, socializing, or beating the wife and children. Round here, what we used to call freedom, and it was worth fighting for. The climax to the fight for the 8-hour day occurs in Haymarket Square, May 4th, 1886. Of course, it would be all too easy to say the fabled events of May 4th, 1880 whatever might never have happened without May 3rd. As if as sure as the suns rise each morning, those who lived through the events of May 3rd were fated, doomed to a May 4th. And that's easy to say with 2024's 2020 hindsight and a mouth. But upon deeper examination, there may be some truth to such a wild claim. It's May 3rd, 1880-something. Slavery and the Civil War ended over 20 years ago and are all but forgotten. And Chicago, Illinois is a vital hub of industrialism. As such, the fabled Windy City is also a cauldron for labor activism in a time of strikes, scabs, goons, and blacklists. On this day, workers rally outside the McCormick's Reaper Works as part of an international push for the 8-hour day. There's a clash with strike breakers, police fire into the crowd, killing 2. A good time was had by all. Because at this point, workers realized that striking and not dying on the job could have a dramatic improvement in their living standards. Local anarchists call for a rally the next day, as they always do. They're anarchists, they're not doing anything. But with at least 3 lives saved by striking at McCormick's, they expect an even bigger turnout at the next day's protest to protest the treatment at today's protest. Flyers are printed asking working men arm yourselves and appear in full force, which was also known as Template Number 2 at the local Kinko's. Newspapers would estimate the crowd as between 600 and 3,000, though anarchists claimed the more precise 603 and 3003. Nearby, a phalanx of Chicago police watches at the ready, fully equipped with protective riot gear, and wielding the latest in crowd control technology. But the event is peaceful. It seems no one got the flyer. Hour after hour passes as police mill about, bored senseless, because smartphones hadn't been invented yet. And brain-dead ideas like defunding police are a pipe dream, a fantasy for the nation's lifetime criminals and newly minted communists. Together, protesters and police endure one barely audible speaker after another, and songs like, "I'll stand by my union," "With my union, stand I will," "Workers, stand with your union," and the all-time banger, "I'll stand, 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 'cause I'm a union man." Naturally, the endless songs about unionizing and standing rile workers and police alike, and much of the crowd has already left when the final speaker finishes around 10:30 p.m. According to accounts, that's when Police Inspector John Bonfield proclaims, "I command you in the name of the law to desist, and you to disperse." Suddenly, someone in the crowd realizes it's been a very long time. 5 years, in fact, since the city of Chicago has burned to the ground. So, of course, he throws a bomb. The homemade fragmentation bomb kills Officer Matthias J. Deegan and severely wounds many others. Cops return fire. More are killed and wounded. An anonymous police official tells the Chicago Tribune a very large number of police were wounded by each other's revolvers. Turns out, a union rally is typically an easy way for a cop to put a bullet into any guy on the force who cheated with his wife. No person would be charged with hurling the bomb that began the slaughter, but Chicago's beat cops had little doubt as to who was responsible. "It wasn't a patty. They don't throw bombs. They grab what's handy, usually bricks and bottles."
They always got bottles.
The Dagos, they're passionate. They throw old fruit, maybe moldy bread.
They are passionate.
The Polacks, they'd be too busy gathering all the moldy bread. The bomb thrower wasn't a goddamn Algonquin, I'll tell you that. He's probably correct. The Algonquins are from eastern Ontario and Quebec, and by this time, there weren't a whole lot of them left.
So it had to be a crowd. Case closed.
Facts. Hey, look at that. It's the Great Upheaval. The Germans. Coming from places like Bavaria and Austria, they pour into the American Midwest seeking a flatter version of the wonderful weather they have back home. Known for their love of science and chemistry, so it is in the 1880s, the very Volk who would one day bestow the world with jets, rockets, and meth are the nation's humble DIY bomb makers. As such, they've received a special invitation to the dance. The 5-minute clash between the German workers and Irish cops is frantic and fierce, with barely any time for either side to stop for a drink. Barely. As the smoke clears, 7 officers are dead. As many as 10 civilians die in the melee, but the exact number is hard to pin down, because in all likelihood, 3 or 4 would have dropped from something else that day. As for injuries, many protesters chose not to seek medical attention, fearing arrest, or worse, medical attention. But dozens are injured, with limbs ripped from their bodies, leaving them unable to work, and have limbs ripped from their bodies. Alarmed business leaders quickly realize if workers continue to blow themselves up, it could have a negative effect on production. Something has to be done. Authorities will soon round up and charge 8 men, because that's how many you can fit in a paddy wagon. And 8 is about as high as the average American household needs to count once the twins die from the fever. The identity of the bomb thrower is never determined, because nearby witnesses are vaporized. But of the 8 men rounded up, only 2 were present at the riot, and there is much speculation as to how the bomb arrived in the square. Was it concealed in a common money bag? Or perhaps smuggled by 2 midgets in a long coat while security was distracted? Fueled by the media's demand for get tough on bomb-throwing anarchist policies, 19th century justice is swift. In the internationally publicized legal proceedings, all 8 men are found guilty of conspiracy. One of them receives a harsh sentence of 15 brutal years in prison. The remaining 7 receive the lighter sentence, death by hanging. In the workers' press, much is made of how the jury pool had been screened to exclude anyone sympathetic towards unions or socialism. Unfortunately, that trick no longer works with today's jury summons. To appease an angry public, Illinois Governor Richard J. Oglesby commutes 2 of the sentences to life in prison. However, one commits suicide in jail before his scheduled execution. 4 are hanged the following November. A harsh, anti-union clampdown follows the Haymarket incident as the nationwide push for the 8-hour day dies. Employers restore the 10 or more hour workday and the use of ethnic tensions to divide the workers. In 1893, Illinois Governor John Altgeld criticizes the trial as a miscarriage of justice and pardons the 3 remaining prisoners. But it was too late. They had already converted to Islam. The Haymarket was designated a Chicago landmark in 1992, and in 2004 it was bestowed with yet another modern public sculpture that looks like it was made by a child, who got paid a ton. The Haymarket Affair is the origin of International Workers' Day, May Day, held around the world every year on May 1st, commemorating the event with parades and truly terrible songs.
At the Haymarket!
In fact, reenactments of the bloody, murderous violence still occur in Chicago.
It has been another deadly weekend for Chicago, with dozens shot across the city since Saturday.
Most every weekend. But the Haymarket Massacre of 1886 marked a simpler time for Chicago and maybe the world. A time when gun violence left dozens killed and wounded. At least someone went to jail for it, which is why you had to be there. Hey, thanks for staying with me. Right here is your invitation to the after party for more thoughts on this Haymarket nonsense and related stuff. And maybe think about subscribing. Check out my channel. I think you're going to like it.